I love people, and this is something I think a lot of people struggle with. And I love the noisy, combative crew, right? So if I go to a staff meeting, I don't want you to be quiet. If it's quiet, I know something else coming in the
something
next
wrong.
2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
They gonna let me get through this meeting and I get into this thing later.
Yeah.
But I want the rambunctious crowd in the corner who's saying, but Mr. B, this ain't right and that ain't right, because oftentimes that's where the advocates for change are, right? And so I tell people, give me the noise any day of the week. And oftentimes, and I had to learn that. Let me just say, that's something that I don't think happens on day one. You often lead from fear, and then you get to this idea of, actually, this thing you're afraid of is actually where the sweet spot is.
Yes.
And so you have to really delve into your fears, and often that's where the nuggets are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the iLEAD podcast. This is Amad Rashad Thompson, the host of this incredible learning opportunity for you, the place you've come to learn, empower, adapt, and disrupt. And you are in for an exceptional treat because I have someone that I believe demonstrate leadership in one of the most profound ways that I've seen in our generation. One, someone that I look up to as a mentor, as a friend, and as an example of leadership. And also three, someone that comes in and I believe automatically, I'm going to be a bit of a weird word, but automatically shifts the focus, shifts the culture in the organizations that he serves in. Today's episode is primarily focused on how we can help you to create a culture in the organizations you get the privilege of serving as leader. And again, you've come to the place where you're going to learn, empower, adapt, and disrupt, because without disruption, proper disruption, intentional disruption, you cannot secure your leadership legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode today, but also to introduce you to our guest today, Franklyn Butler, the one, the only, Franklyn Butler. How are you, sir?
I am delighted to be here, Ahmad. I'm excited to be on this podcast, and just want to, say, I'm humbled by that warm introduction. I don't know if I will meet the expectations of your guests, but
Yes.
I'm here to tell a little bit of my story, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Franklyn, it is an honor for you to be here with me today because, like I said, I truly believe that you are an example. And I've said over and over in this podcast that the world right now is in a leadership crisis. I truly believe that. We don't have enough examples of what it means to be a real, authentic, decent person who happens to be a leader. I think we have culturally and globally wanted to ascend to the idea, to the ideology of leadership. But people like Franklyn Butler help us to understand what that actually is, help us to bring that construct to life. So thank you so much, sir, for being here today. And we're going to go right in, Franklyn. Tell us, who is Franklyn Butler?
Oh, wonderful question. If I had to describe myself, I would say in 3 words, Ahmad, I'm a man of faith. I'm a man who focuses on my family. And I believe I have a gifting in finances.
Okay.
So I always say those are the 3 Fs. Of course, Franklyn and the 3 Fs, right? So that's a little bit about who I am. And really, for me, I always try to focus on my faith as the underlying grounding of who I am. Always want to focus on my family. And I say that in terms of my immediate family, my wife and my one beautiful daughter.
Yes.
And then lastly, finances. So obviously, I've studied accounting and finance. I've spent a lot of time. I serve on quite a few corporate boards. I get to do some amazing things at my age that probably most people in their lives don't get to do. And that's really, I think, as a byproduct of, quite frankly, being able to use my gifts in finance to really transform organizations and people, quite frankly.
Yes. Let's start with the first step, Franklyn. Why is faith important in your leadership journey?
Faith is important because it really speaks to my underlying values, right? And who I am. And I think if I don't have a clear sense of who I am, this whole notion of servant leadership, even modeled by Jesus Christ, quite frankly, is really the most important thing for me. And then, of course, it has to do with things like values like integrity. I think oftentimes we lead from fear. And I tell people, I love people. And this is something I think a lot of people struggle with. And I love the noisy, combative crew, right? So if I go to a staff meeting, I don't want you to be quiet. If it's quiet, I know something else coming in the
something
next
wrong.
2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
They gonna let me get through this meeting and I get into this thing later.
Yeah.
But I want the rambunctious crowd in the corner who's saying, but Mr. B, this ain't right and that ain't right, because oftentimes that's where the advocates for change are, right? And so I tell people, give me the noise any day of the week. And oftentimes, and I had to learn that. Let me just say, that's something that I don't think happens on day one. You often lead from fear, and then you get to this idea of, actually, this thing you're afraid of is actually where the sweet spot is.
Yes.
And so you have to really delve into your fears, and often that's where the nuggets are.
Absolutely. Yeah. You talked about that rambunctious crowd, the crowd that most leaders shy away from. Most leaders actually want to get rid of them.
Yep.
Put them on the list. Get them off this property.
Yep.
How have you found value in those individuals?
Listen, they're my favorite bunch. They are my favorite bunch. And I say that because oftentimes, if someone is prepared to be annoyed, frustrated, angry, rambunctious about how they feel about an organization or how they feel about you, that often means that on the other side there's a deep sense of caring.
Yes.
And for me, that's really what you want to tap into. But the first thing is people say, oh, but you can't relate to what I go and you ain't been in the field with me, you ain't drive the truck and you ain't do this. Well, I tell people in my own story, I started as a summer student at KO Bahamas.
Wow.
And so I've done probably most things. I can't say I've done everything. I've done most things. So I've been in the technician's role. I've climbed ladders. I've done so many things that guys like, oh. And I think now more and more in the organization feel like, okay, well. And I tell them I also been dropped off too in the day for them to go do their whatever they just do when they drop me off as a student too, right? So I tell them, you could hoodwink me a little bit, but I have a good sense of what both sides of the equation look like. And I think throughout my career, while I'm in an executive role, I wasn't born into executive role. I think people think about, kind of my last name and this idea of legacy and privilege. And I always spend a lot of my time asking myself, well, how am I going to leverage my privilege, right?
Yes.
Because I think there's a level of humanness, right? So I am a butler, and people look up to me. But when people kind of get to tell your story and they get to recognize that, listen, all right, he ain't quite the way he see him, he might have a butler name, but at the end of the day, there's some underlying values of hard work and commitment and the ability to understand in a way that most people feel that because you come from that legacy, you just ain't been through what I've been through. And when you carry these titles or when you wear a coat suit every day, people say, well, you look too pristine. I know if you know what life is in the bottom, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so I was delighted even today on this podcast to meet one of your crew who grew up, almost right down the street from Peach Street where, and Milo Butler, and I have to say, my father and parents did a fantastic job with us in hindsight, really causing us to spend time recognizing that while we may have some privileges, hard work was really what entitled us to those privileges. And so, we really got to spend a lot of time, in grassroots type roles, as if I could call it that. Mm-hmm. And that informs how I think about leadership today and why I tell people, give me that rambunctious crowd, man. They my people. I feel a sense of I could get them to find their purpose if I just spend a little bit of time engaging. There's an opportunity for fatherhood, mentorship, because that's actually what they're saying. Listen, nobody ever cared for me.
Yes.
Nobody ever tap in to understand who I am and what I've been through. And oftentimes when you get into that second tier of understanding that individual is really well, they're like, listen, man, I hate to use this term, but there are very few things they will not do for you.
Yes.
I'm going to use the term, I'll die for you. But that's probably a little cultish. But the reality is there are very few things that people will not do for you when they know how much you care for them. Yes. And that's really where I think the opportunity is.
When you think, Franklyn, of leading with care, right? Demonstrating through your leadership that you care. Because leading with care is a lovely statement to put on the wall and the plaque, and we lead with care. But the demonstrative leadership through caring, how do you do that? And how do you challenge other leaders that are not doing it?
So the question is, what is caring really? Right? And I often find that oftentimes people think caring is about, and that's why people talk about people-y people. I don't know what people-y people is, right? Because people-y suggests this idea of just soft skills, just talk to me nice. In fact, love ain't about talking to us nice. And caring ultimately is this idea of love, in my view.
Yes.
And sometimes love is hard. Sometimes love is painful. I mean, that's just the reality of love, right? I mean, when our parents wanted to discipline us, they didn't just say, oh, go sit in the corner and be nice. I mean, sometimes that looked like a belt. Sometimes that looked like, writing lines. Sometimes that looked like, going to bed early, whatever that sacrifice is. And that's the painful process. But the other side of that was this idea of self-actualization. When you went through, whether it was a beating or whether it was some form of something being taken away,
Yes.
you woke up the next morning saying, "Oh, but mommy, I love you," or "Daddy, I love you," because you realized that whatever lesson they were trying to teach you, you felt a little bit better about it.
Yes.
And that is often the part of caring that most people don't want to deal with, because caring is only people-y.
Yeah.
It's soft, it's nice, it's
Yes.
comfortable.
Yes.
And quite frankly, I find that, until you can ask people, so who are you? Who do you want to become?
Yeah.
And there's always this gap between who we are and who we want to become.
Definitely.
And once people start to ask them, well, what you mean, who am I? Who am I?
Yeah.
This idea of who I am, most people don't know their titles.
Absolutely.
People don't actually know who they are.
Absolutely.
And I think, I don't care where you are in life, when you start asking people, who am I? They really start to say,
Who am I?
who am I?
Yeah.
And by bringing them on that journey of caring around who they are, who I am, who am I, is really where you start to unleash caring, because that ultimately means sacrifice. And usually I tell people all the time, you start talking about people-y things. As a leader, one of the first things people always ask is, "Oh, what could you do for me? Give me more money."
Yeah, of course.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You know why? I tell people, you know why people often ask for more money when they really want more caring?
Yes.
It is the easiest thing to quantify.
Yes.
People cannot quantify caring.
Care. That's good.
But money, I need $400 more, or I need $200
yeah.
more, or $50 more, and that can make me straight. But
That line right there, that line, Franklin.
Absolutely.
Boss, another 100, I can be straight.
That's it.
I always want, I'm so sorry to interrupt right there, but I feel like straight for how long?
That's the
straight
point.
until what? Straight
That's
until
the
when?
point. That's the point.
You know?
And this is where I make the analogy around finances and this idea of caring and love, because ultimately that's how we measure care. This idea of who am I is defined by how much money I make.
Or how much I'm worth.
Or how much I'm worth. And the money is how I'm worth.
Wow.
But I tell people, at the end of the day, I'm not worth money. I am worth my potential. So when I look back at my own life, and my wife often laughs at this, I'll be driving actually, wherever, PI, and I'll see a guy and I'll say, "Hey, that guy worked for me." Or I go to the police station. Recently I had an incident, probably about a year ago, where I had to go to the police station, and the guy who greets me at the police station says, "Hey, Mr. B, I got you. Come go in the room." Because these are guys who I've poured into all my life. And these fellas who was driving truck, right? And I tell them I know but offloading a container box by box with them.
Yes.
And so when they see you now, it's like, listen, man, you really cared for me and you took them through this process.
Yes.
And oftentimes I have the conversation around money and value in this context of caring. Because listen, who you want to become?
Yes.
Leave me to go be, no problem. Leave me to go be a police officer. Leave me to go to defense force. But don't leave me to go to jail.
Yes.
And that ultimately has to do with about this idea of what sacrifices am I prepared to make today? Hey, you may not be making the money you make today, but I am more than having to steal your money.
Yes.
I am prepared to go and wash a car. I am prepared to go and work 2 jobs to get the things I need, but I am also prepared to be disciplined around how I spend my money to make sure I can make ends meet, because I have 2 young children, or I have a sick mummy, or I have whatever the realities are. And I've been, like you in the food service business, where I've watched what I call gangsters,
Yeah.
quote unquote. I mean, guys with real criminal records who come back and say, "Hey, you're like a father to me. Thank you for all that you've done." And that's been a part of my own legacy. I think being a butler and being in the industry that we came from, we see so many people who come from real inner city communities who have not had this idea of privilege, but when you can pour into them. And sometimes it looks like, "Hey, I got a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
Could you help me out?" Actually giving them the money is not caring for them. And that's really where this people-y stuff I struggle with, right? Because it ain't like, I can't give you the money because
that's only going to enable you.
all I'm going to do is enable you.
Yes.
But to have the conversation and say, "Listen, I would do almost anything for you."
Accept that.
But in this instance, to do that is actually enabling
Yes.
what is a really difficult situation. And those are the kinds of things that I often try to get to the root of, right? And not to lead by chasing symptoms, as I call them. Right? So people often want money, and I'm going to come off the money issue, because they are dealing with these underlying issues, whether that's gambling, whether that's whatever.
Insufficiency,
Absolutely.
whatever it is, yes.
And ultimately, what I'm saying to you is money is important. People absolutely need to have a standard of living. But oftentimes, when they come to you, they're coming to you with really all of these other underlying issues,
yes.
which we as leaders, and I accept that we may not necessarily be counselors. And, people always ask, is that my role? People need to go get help. I ain't they ma, or I ain't they pa. But the reality is when you care, you have an opportunity to really tap in. And that's why the question is, who am I?
Yeah.
And who do I want to be? Listen, if I always tell people, you could ask the question anyway. If I had all the money in the world, what would I do? If I don't have all the money in the world, what would I do?
Yes.
Those are the same questions at the end of the day. And, that's really where you get people to think about their purpose.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something just now. You said, anima, anepa, they have an opportunity, especially when there is the privilege of leadership.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that opportunity for a true leader becomes obligation.
Yep.
Right? Because how could you as a leader encounter someone who is not at their best in going through something, not demonstrating the best values, the best ideologies, the best practices, leave them where you met them and call yourself leader?
Yep.
Right? It's an obligation, I believe, to take that opportunity you've been blessed with to elevate that person's experience and help them to see the best in them.
Yes. But that is only if you have lived a life that caused you to understand where they come from. And oftentimes I tell people I've lived a fairly privileged life. I've been off to school. Maybe I didn't grow up in a household where my mommy was an alcoholic or my daddy was an abuser or whatever. And those are realities of so many of our people.
Many people.
And I think we often forget that.
Yes.
And so if you ain't never been through that,
how could you relate to me?
How could you relate to me? And this is the point I'm making to you when people come in a room and they say, I want to tell you, Mr. Butler, Mr. B, I got some things for you to deal with.
You need to know.
Because ultimately what they're saying is, listen.
I know you care.
Or, let me see if you care.
Let me test you.
And because ultimately they're saying, listen, this $400 ain't cutting it.
Yeah.
And listen, this $400 ain't cutting it, not because it ain't cutting it. It ain't cutting it because there's some underlying issues oftentimes that they're trying to figure out how to do a budget.
Yes.
Nobody ever talked to me about budgeting. In my house, my old man used to tell how much shade you have, how much pants you have. So budget is a normal thing for me.
Yeah.
So whether I got 400 or 800, I can find a way to make that work.
Yeah.
But that's the point, that's where I come from. But not where everybody else come from.
Yes.
And so I could talk about how you can't manage money, and I could cuss them and carry on and speak from a point of privilege.
Yeah.
Or I could say, no, help me understand what's happening here.
Yes.
And it's really when you start to understand what's happening at the root of that person's experience. Hey, I grew up all my life as an alcoholic, or I've had this challenge. And I've had young men who come to me and say, listen, how could I help you?
Yes.
And sometimes you refer them to people to get help. Or there are other times where it's just economy. Listen, I'm watching you,
You know better than that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it's just that encouraging. And not that you do that to embarrass them.
Or in judgment.
But on a one-on-one, listen, I see you making an effort.
Yes.
I see you've been looking good. Your eyes ain't glassy.
Yes.
Those are the types of conversations I have. Because it's a progress, right? I tell people, I don't know nobody who go to church and the day they get saved and sanctified, they don't sin no more.
Yeah.
The reality, this is a continuum.
Absolutely.
And that's where we
journey.
start. That's the point. And that's my point around leadership, is that this is a continuum, right? Yes. So I tell people all the time, and in our organization, why do we keep having to do it? Because I don't know nobody who's saved, who go to the altar and get saved, and all of a sudden they know all the behaviors they got to carry on.
Yes.
They don't.
One of the things I dislike most in organizations, clients, and this kind of thing, they should know better. Okay.
Or I thought you knew that as the boss.
How many things do you know better than that you still is do?
Absolutely.
They should know better. They've been here for 40 years, and you let them do what they've been doing they get better at it.
Absolutely.
Practice makes perfect,
Absolutely.
good and bad.
Yes.
And when you let someone do what you know is wrong or shouldn't be done, and they get strength in doing it, they should know better don't mean nothing to nobody.
Yep.
Right? Or when somebody says, they know, my question to them is, how do you know that they know?
Absolutely.
Right? How do you, Franklyn, at your level of leadership now, you are the leader of a multi-million-dollar organization that is doing very well, at least from the outside in. How do you get your leaders to move beyond their title, their position, to create an actual environment of care?
If I knew the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be doing this, right? And I said because it's a constant work in progress.
Yes.
And I know people look at it and they say, "Oh, it looks like we're doing it," but it's a constant fight. If I was to put a hidden camera in my office just yesterday, I would have been having this conversation asking somebody in my organization, is my team getting it?
Wow.
What else could I be doing? I mean,
Yes.
this is literally a question I asked yesterday. What else could I be doing as a leader to get people to really buy into this philosophy, right? Because you never know when you've got it.
Yeah.
All you know is you got to constantly reinforce. And, it's really when life change happens, when somebody come back and say, boy, thank you. I see what you're trying to do around your leadership or investing in me or causing me to see. And that's an everyday journey, because the same way you do see that progress, sometimes you see the slip-ups, and when you see the slip-ups, you say, boy, I thought they was getting it, and maybe I thought they was getting it, they ain't getting it no more, right? And so you live in this, what you call balance between gas and brakes, where you say, oh yeah, we going, and now it's like,
Yes.
you turn it back around, you're like, okay, we have to reinforce this. And this is really where, for me, I think, when I think about our organization, this is why we spend a lot of time on leadership training. And I always tell people, there are a couple of things. Your home pastor often don't save you.
Yeah.
There's that guest preacher who come in there and been saying the same thing, your
right
home
up.
pastor, and you say, oh, Jesus,
Yes.
I feel it now.
Shando.
That's the point. And I think in leadership, it's the same way. And so oftentimes I'm always thinking about, for my own journey, where else am I getting fed?
Yeah.
And how else am I exposing my team members to opportunities around leadership
Yes.
and leadership philosophy? Because my leadership is being informed by something.
Yes.
And my leadership is often being informed by the classrooms that I'm in or the people that I get to meet. And so this is why I often encourage my team, listen, the people who taught you a couple of years ago, or you was your college professor, or who you work with, how many times are you reaching out to them?
Yeah.
Because they're solving the same problems that we're trying to solve.
Yes.
And sometimes when you are in the midst of your leadership journey, because you only see these crises and you feel like it's only your organization, until you pick up the phone, you call someone, no, we're dealing exactly with that. And you say, And then they say, oh, and actually you're dealing with it better than we dealing with it. I want to take some tips from you.
Yes, yes.
And that is where I think we have to always balance this inside view of leadership versus the outside view of leadership. And the outside view often means who is our peer set of leaders and of leadership, and who are we continuing to ask questions of around what should our leadership look like?
Yes.
Or what should our business look like? I talk about leadership. That could be around products and services. That could be around leadership. That could be around any number of things. But that is a cycle, because oftentimes when organizations become too insular, they often start to feed themselves. To your point about 40 years you're doing the same thing, well, that's because you become very insular.
Yes.
You start to say, well, listen, this been waking here. I ain't getting no outside perspective. This is how it been waking. Nobody correct me.
Yes.
So what you expect?
Right.
And I always tell people, when I joined cable, I always say one of the most important metrics for me was our employee turnover. And this is one I struggle with, because this is to your point about humanity and humanness, right? The worst performing metric for us was we had less than 1% employee turnover.
Wow.
So what do you think happens when you have less than 1% employee turnover?
Wow.
You start feeding yourself.
Yes.
Are we looking from the outside in? Are we taking our customers' perspective? Are we looking at what other organizations are doing around the world, around the region?
Wow.
So I make all that point to say to you, Amad, that leadership is one of these things where we have to continue to be reassessing. Because as people change, as people transform, as industries change, we are really leading within that context. We are not leading. We're not peopling in absolute.
Yes.
We are peopling to bring people to a point of self-actualization that must be aligned by the corporate goals, their personal values, and that is how we're ultimately leading.
You just said something just now. You essentially described the evolution of leadership.
Yep.
Because I am leading you in the context of our nowness.
Right.
Right? I can't lead you the way my father led me 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
Because the dynamic has changed tremendously. My brother Franklyn is 21 years old.
Yeah.
Bless him from his head to his feet. God bless him. Save him, Christ. Save him.
Quickly.
Quick, with the quickness. Don't tarry on that. Do that today. Do that with a level of immediacy.
All right.
And the leadership, the way you led a 21-year-old 21 years ago, that person was really 41 in their mind.
Absolutely.
They was different. But at 21, and this is not to offend any 21-year-old today, but the way they operate, the way their mind works is 100 and million % different. 100 and million % different. And my brother was on vacation, right? And I said, when you go back to work? Bro, I know. Repeat it. Say it in Spanish.
Yeah.
Yo no sé.
Yeah.
Help me out. What you mean you don't know? But they can call me when they ready for me. What?
Yeah.
Franklin, you run an organization where turnover is a concern, or was a concern initially when you picked it up. You're checking stuff like vacation time and who ain't taking it, who taking it, get this amount of the guy says to me, bro, you gotta come. It ain't your job. They can call me when they're ready for me.
Yep.
How when you talk about the context of leadership now, because contextually you have to think about the fact that leadership today is not leadership 21 years ago,
Absolutely.
20 years ago.
Yep.
And you also talked about the fact that you have to be continuously learning. I truly believe, Franklin, that the one thing or one of the things that separates successful leaders or successful people from unsuccessful people are those that are continuing to learn,
Yep.
but then apply what they've learned, right? How do you help someone lead their child? Because they want to lock their child up in one closet and do something to him. How do you lead that person, Franklin? How do you get people to get to the point where they can lead a generation they're not a part of or can't even understand?
Yeah. Good question. And I feel like this is one that I've struggled with.
Yeah.
Not so much as a father of my own child, because my daughter's only 5, but my wife has a little sister.
Okay.
And is a creative to no extent. You give her drawing, artist, great artist, loves technology, somebody I greatly admire, to be honest. Her name is Talia Burrows. So I want to give a shout out to Talia. I hope she's watching on social media as well. But such a strong personality. So here's what I tried to do with her because she likes social media. And this is a real story. Because she wanted to get into baking and so forth and so on. I say, well, here's what I'm going to do. You want to be on social media? Why don't you create your own business where you bake cupcakes and cookies, which is what she was into at the time. And this was a couple of years ago. She's now almost going to be 17.
Okay.
And I said, if you're into that, why don't we create a website? Take all these skills and things that you want to do. Let's find a way to make this in a positive way. And she actually did it. She set up a website. She got everything going. We had a little business going where she used to take pictures. And I say, well, take the pictures now and let's post it.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I wonder if that website is up. I got to check after the show. But that's how you have to find ways to get them to recognize. Then she was like, listen, here's the thing now. She used all my free flour and the free sugar from my house to make her product. And the pricing is just $3 because it's supposed to be $3.
Yeah.
And I started to say, but listen, how much the flour cost? How much the sugar cost? The next time you bake, I know I ain't giving you my free stuff, but you got to let them start with your free stuff.
Yes.
Now, somehow I think that's when the business closed because she thought it was going to be an opportunity for her to take my free flour and free sugar and profit.
Yeah.
And I just say that to say that that's the journey that you're often on. But you got to give them some small wins, right?
Yes.
So, she loved the idea of setting up the website now. And she said, oh, yeah, we can make red velvet cake and this and that. She loved it. I promise you. But now when you start to take them on the next step of the journey, what is the cost?
Yes.
How much is this? How much of your time are you investing on a Saturday?
Yes.
Is this cookie priced at the right price? Is this cupcake priced at the right price?
Yes.
Then she starts saying,
how do I enter this?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the same thing applies for, I think, all kids. I'm big on this. And even with her and my daughter now. When we travel, I give my daughter $10. And you know what I want to do with that? All I'm trying to get her to recognize is trade-offs.
Okay.
I don't really care what she spent it on.
Yeah.
But listen, if you go in the dollar store, only so much $10 can buy.
Yes.
But here's what she doing. She see all these things she like, books and crayons and daddy a this and a that. Only $10 you got. So she started to say, no, all of a sudden, I don't want this. I want that.
Yes.
And I don't want this. I want that. And so daddy just give me these 5 things. I don't want them other 5 things.
Yes.
And that is how we soon start to find out what do we really value.
Yes.
And this is how we have to try to mentor this next generation because what they value, I may not value. A puppet and these funny mirror and thing, I don't know what that means. I say, you waste your money on that? That's what I don't understand.
But that's an investment.
That's
some
the
big
point.
Payoff.
And for her, that allow her to do whatever she wants to do.
Yes.
But this is where we have to give them the opportunities to figure out where their trade-offs. What is it that I love so much that I'm going to invest my money, I'm going to invest my time and start to price it.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, if it's a business, and it could start, it could be a lemonade stand.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, when the lemon come from mommy and the water come from mommy and the sugar and
Yes.
you mix that, the price make any sense?
Yes.
Now, when you got to go buy them lemons and Solomon's or Solomon's Fresh Market,
Yeah,
you start
yeah,
asking yourself, well,
I know
if this really making sense. But that's the journey we're always on. You got to give
Yes.
them a little bit of small wins and then take them on the leadership journey. And that's what we do, whether that's a 21-year-old or 41-year-old or
Yes.
60-year-old who says, listen, man, struggling. At home, I got my challenges, I'm making this money. I don't have a budget or, my children don't get it or my husband don't get it. Those are the same questions. This is what happened in all HR departments, by the way. Hey, this ain't unique to cable.
Absolutely.
And people are saying, so what should I do? I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And you got to sit them down and say, you ever write a budget? And they'll say, well, I got a budget, but, I give access to this one on my account and then that. This is a journey, right?
Yes.
And so you start to say, listen, it ain't that you're trying to be mean-spirited, but caring and love
Boundaries.
is about setting boundaries.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's painful. And this is where leadership, caring, and this is why I always tell people, I don't get into this people-y thing. People, caring is about ultimately what are the objectives. And they could be personal objectives or they could be business objectives.
Yes.
You want to raise? Help me find some ways to be more efficient. That's what I'm asking you.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, man, boss, that fella there who's slacking off. Let me tell you, but don't tell him I say nothing.
Yeah.
But I could tell you, man, the truck was parked by so and so,
Yeah.
And that's where you ultimately want people to start. Now, they don't want to call them out.
No.
But you want to give them the courage to eventually get to the point where they call them out. Because that becomes your supervisors.
Absolutely.
If
And
you
that's
could
how
call
get
it,
the culture.
that's the point. And if you get this young fella to start to call this out and to call out his peers, that's my first supervisor. That's my
Absolutely.
lead. That's my whatever you want to call
Yes,
it.
yes.
Entitles. So, I think that's the journey we're ultimately going on.
So you create the culture by, first of all, finding out from the person what they value,
Absolutely.
right? What are the people you get to lead valuing?
Yep.
What are they putting value on? Once you identify what they value, then we determine how can I add more value to that.
Right.
At the same time, I want to give you some additional responsibility, hold you to a different level of accountability, and then get you to be get more vitality from you in this organization.
But what's most important is I know what I value
Yes.
and what matters to me as a CEO. Because if I ain't clear about that,
Yes.
worrying about what you value ain't gonna make no difference.
serve
Because
you.
at the end of the day, if I ain't in the role to pour into you, you probably ain't gonna be in the role either.
Absolutely. If I'm not in the role to pour into you, how do you expect them to stay in the role with you?
That's the point.
Wow.
Because at the end of the day, I tell people, leadership ain't about me. It's how much of my people I could bring along.
Jeez.
Because I ain't serving the customer.
Absolutely.
So one of the things people say is everybody know you, Mr. Butler. They call the contact center and Mr. Butler, they say, I call Mr. Butler personally. I say, well, that's what accountability look like.
Yes.
Because ultimately, if they feel that you can serve them, they ain't gonna never call me.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. So how do you, Franklyn, that? Because there are persons in leadership roles, and this is the reason this podcast is birthed, who simply believe that the title CEO is all that matters.
Yep.
I am the CEO.
Yep.
Do what I say, do it when I say it, do it how I say it. What do you say to that person, to that type of leader? Or to that type of person who happens to hold the leadership position?
You're probably leading by manipulation, not by true leadership.
Wow.
Because people really don't care what your title is. People know what my title is,
Yeah.
but I could be honest. From I joined the business, one of the things I was very intentional about, and this is the thing that I think awed a lot of people when I was at cable, is I spent time in the contact center, and I just sit there. I used to have conversation. They say, but Mr. B, how come you in the contact center? Our executives don't come in the contact center.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things they can tell you that happened. Then they'll say, oh, but this chair, my chair been a problem, or I need a privacy screen. They go upstairs, and I'm new to the organization really at this time. And I don't know how to get I literally even know how to cut a PO to even know better. Sometimes I just say, listen, go get a privacy screen. And before you know it, they go.
Yeah.
That's the first trust currency you're able to build.
Yes.
And these $2 privacy screen, I don't know how much price. I can go on Amazon and find the thing and ship it, But these are the kinds of trust currencies that you have to go on.
Say that word again, that statement again.
That, listen, you have to create trust currencies.
Now, hold on. You can't just drop that and walk off. Okay, trust currency. You got me divert for a second here, but trust currency, right? Trust is the new currency, is what I'm hearing you say there.
Absolutely.
How do you build more money? How do you build more currency as a leader? How do you do that? How do you build more trust currency?
First of all, by identifying and recognizing that people don't really care about your title.
Yes.
They want to know how much you care.
Wow.
And so when you want to know how much you want people to know how much you care, you got to find ways to connect with them.
Yes.
And sometimes that's simple things. for me, when I joined cable, was sitting in the contact center and people saying, "Oh, well, I don't know executives come and do that." Then they start to tell you the little things.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I need a screen protector. A screen, baby, that's what you need. A screen
all you
protector.
need? That's all you need right now to do better.
And I
Let me
say
get
that being very mindful that it sounds like that's all you need, like you almost being flippant about it.
Yeah.
But in real terms, all of us know that it's a screen protector.
Wow.
Like, you mean you can't get a $2 screen protector? Your
Yeah.
manager can't, like, you put the focus on that.
Yes.
Sometimes it's safety equipment. Sometimes it's, like, when you talk about the P&L,
Yes.
like, we got real issues on the P&L. Not a safety jacket.
Yes.
Not a screen protector is the point I'm making when I'm
Yes.
talking.
Yes.
But that's where it starts from. And then when you start to get into that, then you start to recognize, okay, what else could I do to help make this better? And then they start to give you little suggestions. And then you start to engage with the management team. And then you ask yourself, but where's the management team?
Yeah.
Or where's the manager? Where's your supervisor? Why aren't you having this in your huddles?
Yes.
And then you start to realize simple things. Oh, we ain't had a huddle in
So and so long.
because there's an expectation that when the executives meet once a quarter, once every 6 months with all the staff, that's when I say, listen, if you're all coming to me asking me for screen protectors and safety equipment, that's what this meeting about.
Exactly.
It is what the meeting is about because that's a part of the journey I had to get through to get to the big picture items.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily what you set out to accomplish. You really
Yes.
want to be talking about the larger strategic objectives, how we're going to serve our customers better. But if your team ain't know that you serving them, they ain't serving nobody.
Wow. So your trust bank essentially is
Yeah.
depleted.
Absolutely.
Because one, you're not doing what you said you would. Two, they don't feel comfortable coming to
Whoever that is in leadership.
and saying, hey, all I need right now today is just a screensaver, a screen
Absolutely.
protector.
Absolutely.
How did you make the transition, Franklyn, successfully from running a family business to joining a corporate organization? Because I imagine while there's some similarities, there are also some big differences. How did you successfully manage that transition?
Well, let me just question whether the success is relative. I'm not sure whether I've done it successfully or not. But I would say, how do you manage? First of all, I always started with some basic things, which was, I don't know what I don't know.
Okay.
So what may have seemed to someone else as me trying to connect with them, it was really me being educated.
Yeah. Teach me.
I don't know nothing about this business. I didn't know telecoms. I didn't know what an HFC node was or fiber and all these wonderful. And listen, when you go into this new business, they got acronym upon acronym.
Yes.
Everybody could tell you, but this acronym,
All the
and I'm
jargon.
like, excuse me, what that is?
Yes.
So you have to first start off by saying, listen, guns down,
Yeah.
I rest my case, teach me.
Yeah.
And that's generally what I try to say, listen, I don't really understand. So I'm sitting here as an observer, not as a CEO or whatever you may perceive.
Yes.
I need to begin to understand this business.
How is that? People see that, as a deterrent or as a flaw.
Yep.
So appearing to not have the answer means that I'm weak or I'm less effective as a leader. When in fact, when I have the opportunity to learn the answer, I can empower that person that's teaching me. How do you get someone to shift their focus around what that is? Seeing that unknowingness, if you will, as a superpower versus like a hindrance.
Experience. There's many studies, and anybody who's read Brene Brown's book
Yes.
around vulnerability, right? And using vulnerability as a bit of a superpower. I think I would tell anybody, when you're able to be vulnerable with your team, listen, I'm not sure where we're going. The pandemic, I don't know what's going to happen. And those are things that for me, I make a practice out of, right?
Yes.
So the pandemic, I didn't know. So two things I said to my executive team is, listen, I could take a pay cut, and I know there was a lot of flack in the media around what Cable Bahamas did.
Sure.
But one of the things we did is all of our executives at the end took a pay cut. And in addition to that, what we sought to do is, even if you were on furlough, we made sure that anybody who was on furlough was taking home at least $400 a week.
Wow.
So they were getting the
benefit
$200 from NIB or whatever it was, and they were getting $200 that was effectively pay cut. So again, we had to protect the organization first.
Yes.
So again, I tell people, I'm people in for the sake of people in.
Yes. Yes.
If the organization ain't here to serve you and to give you a well-being and to be in good health and good shape,
Yes.
you aren't gonna be in good health and good shape. Or you could be in good health and good shape, but
Somewhere else.
you aren't gonna be here for much longer. That's the reality of it.
Absolutely, yes.
So I would say to you that I think at the end of the day, we have to start with understanding that it's okay not to know. and pride and these things. Because if you come in there with the vibrato that I'm the CEO and I know everything, and I didn't come from telecoms. I
Yes.
tell anybody I didn't come, but I understand P&Ls because I did accounting and finance and I understood people. So that's all I really need to know. I tell people I could take any job and I could figure it out.
Yes.
Now, it may take me a little longer than somebody who has had industry experience, if it was a banking role or if it was another role. But I believe I have enough sense. And I make this a practice on every one of my teams because I think sometimes I find this particularly unique about telecoms is, oh, well, I'm an engineer. Bro, I appreciate you as an engineer. All that means is you have deep knowledge.
Yeah.
But even with my accounting background, I could understand basic principles of engineering.
Yes.
So bring me along. Don't make your decision-making model a secret because you're an engineer or you are in finance. I tell people I have a big P&L and cable P&L is whatever, 200 million in revenue. All I tell people all the time is, what's your salary? What's your mortgage?
Yeah.
How much is your car payment? The same thing you're doing with your salary every week. Paying your mortgage, paying your school fees for your children.
Yes.
That's all I doing at a bigger level as it relates to the organization. Now, could I talk about EBITDA and all these wonderful principles of accounting to kind of confuse people? Absolutely, I could do it if I wanted to be absolutely confused.
Yes.
But every time I have a finance speech and I talking to my general team,
Yes.
my message is, listen, let's take our salaries, think about your mortgage. If we deduct that mortgage, that's my loan. That's the debt I carry at cable.
Yes.
I got to pay that back over 20 years, okay? So that's the conversation we having today. We ain't having no conversation about preference shares and this and debentures. Because when I start adding them, I go to like debenture, the average person just don't get it.
Yes. Yes.
But you tell them, okay, now you got a mortgage on your house. Or you paying rent if you ain't got a mortgage on your house. Now listen, you have one wife or two wives. Where that money going?
Yeah.
Well, we ain't want to talk about that. So that's the secret. That's all the errors in the business that we got going on right now.
Absolutely. Wow.
That's the type of conversation.
That's the mismanagement of the equipment and
That's
leaving the
the
lights
point.
on. And the
That's
printing
the
this
point.
and
Because
that.
we don't want to talk about that.
Yes.
Because man, I know I do that, but
Yeah, that nobody business.
that nobody
That we do.
absolutely.
Wow.
And only the fella on the truck know.
Yeah,
I drop the jack
yeah.
off and I leave it by the Chinese or
Right.
whatever it is in the context of the distribution business.
Absolutely.
This happens all the time. Now, whether that's the jack, I tell people it could be the difference. Someone throwing away fiber, it could be any number of things. Give me the
Yes.
industry, I could find a way to
Yes.
draw an analogy towards it.
Yes.
So I really got to know the industry if you understand people
Absolutely.
and you understand finances.
Yes. When you think, Franklyn, of the journey that you've had to date with leadership, is there anything, any decision you made and you thought, wow, Frank, that was not it? A decision you made, an action you displayed, a behavior demonstrated.
Yeah, listen, I think I've had several of those decisions, right? And so I always tell people I am the product of many of those decisions.
Okay.
Because when you're in leadership, I tell people you ain't born as mature as you are. You ain't born as experienced as you are. And if I look back at my career, I can tell you there have been several of those mistakes that I've made.
Yes.
Whether that's in the family business, I could go to many of those in terms of maybe even how I managed relationships.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, what I've determined in my own mind, Amad, is I am not going to allow myself to be a victim of those decisions. Now, I can tell you that if you are like me, there are some people who never forgive
Yes.
those mistakes that you make in your journey.
Yes.
But I think I've been fairly intentional around my own career
Yes.
of where I've made mistakes of going back and asking forgiveness.
Yes.
But that don't mean that people let those issues go.
No.
But I believe I've been fairly intentional about being direct about that.
Yeah.
So much so now that I focus on how do I leverage going forward those mistakes when I've made mistakes to think about how am I making decisions with a
Yes.
greater degree of intentionality. Sometimes I should have been more direct
Yeah.
on the difficult decisions and say, listen, this is the real issue at stake in the context of whether my family business or at cable. I've done that many, many times before. But the reality is you can't also, when you are leading, you can't let the band lead the director.
Wow.
The director
Gotta
gotta
lead the
direct the
band.
band.
Wow.
And sometimes the music don't come out like the director sent.
Yes.
But listen, when that session is over, we sit down and we say, listen, I wasn't on it as a director. These are the things I'm going to do differently. And that's where personal and self-reflection is an
comes
important part of leadership.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think there's anybody who leads and says they've led and they have a 10 out of 10 score on the difficult decisions.
Yes.
If they tell you they had a 10 out of 10 score, they're lying to you.
Lie.
They probably got a 2 out of 10
Yeah.
on the big decisions.
Yeah.
And the 7 mistakes that they made is what made the 2 out of 10 so significant that we don't talk about the 7 or the 3 out of 10.
You mentioned the word forgiveness.
Yep.
Having to, or deciding to, not having to, but deciding to say, you know what, Mary, Paul, Susan, I shouldn't have done that.
Yep.
Can you forgive me for what we did or what I demonstrated here? Why is that important as a person, but also as a leader? Why is it important to go back and not only apologize, but to seek the forgiveness of the person or persons that you may have wronged or affected or offended in a situation? Why is that a big deal?
I started this talking about the 3 F's of Franklin.
You did.
Faith, family, finances.
Yes.
My faith is such that how much grace have I gotten?
My Lord.
How much grace have I gotten?
Jesus.
How much grace have I gotten?
Yes. I feel this happened to me this week, Franklin. It was Monday, and someone came to me at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And I lashed out. I used derogatory language. I came out of my character and out of who I say I represent, which is God.
Absolutely.
And the Holy Spirit would not release me.
Yep.
I had to stop what I was doing, and I went to I saw his boss before I saw him.
Yeah.
And I told him what I did, and I said to him, I need you to also forgive me.
Yeah.
Because I stand up often, and I teach us how to demonstrate.
Yeah.
But the moment I get an opportunity, I show you something completely different.
Yep.
And I went and I happened to find him dealing with another man. I said, may I please have a moment of your time? He said, sure. First he called my name, Amad Rashad Thompson. He clapped his hand like, yeah, you was the one who just laid me out. And I said, can I just talk to you for a quick minute? And we went into a quiet area, and I said to him, please allow me to apologize, 1, and to 2, ask your forgiveness. He said, man, boss, man, everybody's have their day. I said, no. Because that faith you talk about is the grace that got me to this position. Absolutely. And for me to manipulate or for me to mismanage that opportunity, Franklin, through our ounce of humanity and not correct that the moment I have the opportunity to, is I think the mistake many leaders make. We figure, oh, everybody has a bad day. We rationalize our bad behavior. And you talked about it earlier too, where that one time, even though you ask for reconciliation and you try to be better, that person won't let it go.
Yep.
But he has the right to hold me to that standard.
Absolutely.
Because I demonstrated that to him, not the other way around.
Absolutely.
And when I told my leadership team about what I did that Monday, because I also believe in transparency, and I told them I overreacted in my initial conversation with the young man, and the gentleman said to me, boss, I think you overreacted now, like it ain't that serious. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we agree. I'm like, no, it is that serious, guys. If we cannot act if our actions cannot match our words, why are we doing this?
Yeah. And it's back to this point about the trust currency.
Definitely.
When we act out of character, when our values or our decisions don't align with our values, and we are not prepared to ask for forgiveness of others, then the real question is, how are we creating trust currency?
Absolutely. How can I trust you?
That's the point.
You said something, did something else, didn't come back to be held to account for it. So everything else you said, and it was a lie.
That's the point.
And the person has the right to believe it.
That's the point.
Here's how I put it, Frank. I believe that if it is that Franklin and I have a conversation, and I lead the conversation and I say something about Franklin, y'all, Franklin is this, Franklin is that, and Franklin shows that I said, right? He doesn't say that, but he shows that Franklin is a liar.
Absolutely.
If Franklin shows the opposite of what I say, I am a conspiracy theorist.
Yep.
And people start to say, but man, you freaking out because Franklin don't show me that. Franklin is the one who's come to our meetings. Franklin is the one who's go and get us our screen protectors. You was the one who's saying it but never is do it. All of a sudden then, when your actions and your words become non-congruent, you have flaws. You have a distrust currency now.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And this is where manipulation starts. Because people start to think, well, listen, you got to do this because I'm the boss.
Wow.
We're not doing this because I trust you or because you recognize that in your leadership role, that trust is the ultimate currency.
Wow.
People don't work for salary, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, people they have needs.
Yes.
But I tell people, recently I'm aware of a situation where a negotiation was going on And the question was about whether $1,000 or $2,000 or some inconsequential number.
Yes.
And my simple position is, listen, I'm not concerned about the money that you guys are. Because at the end of the day, you could get 2,000, you get 5,000. But if you all ain't find ways to behave, to interact, you can get that $5,000, then you can say, child, y'all don't pay me enough money for how you all is treating me.
Yes.
Because ultimately people want to be treated well.
Yes.
And yes, they want to be compensated well. But it is a price. There becomes a price at some stage, Amad, where people don't care how much they make if they're not treated as human beings.
Absolutely.
If they ain't got that, they could trust you. If they can't believe in your vision, they can't understand the strategy around what you're trying to do, then at the end of the day, they don't care how much money they pay, you could pay them.
Absolutely.
They just ain't prepared to go through that. And this is how most people should be thinking about when they decide to go apply for a job. Yeah. You need to be asking them leaders these type of questions.
Yes.
Listen, what's the long-term strategy? And if these things don't align when I get in the organization versus what you said to me when I was thinking about coming to the organization, that's why you leaving.
Yes. It's as simple as that.
You can back up and say, listen, this sounds good.
This ain't working out.
This sounded good.
Yeah,
but when I came here, this is something completely different.
Yeah.
And this is where we often got to get our leaders, because we you know how it is. We good at all these digital media now. We give a nice presentation and intro, and this the company and who we are, and this is how we can do it. And then you find that, listen, the leader could say this, but when I come to my manager or my supervisor, the message is distorted because they don't quite live. You know, Mr. Butler, I could trust him, but I ain't know about the rest of these people. And you soon find that Mr. Butler managing 50 people, but he only have direct reports of 5. And this is what we see oftentimes in organizations.
Yes.
And this is why, I reiterate the importance of why all of us as leaders got to continue to coach and teach and take people through the process.
Yes.
Because ultimately, to the point where we started, when we make mistakes and we ask for grace,
yes,
the most important thing we're acknowledging is, listen, there's a standard.
Yes.
And secondly, we recognize there's a standard and we all got to continue to be better.
All
got to be committed. Because the thing is, I could be one way, but people don't judge the business by how I behave only. They say, but listen, look at your executives, look at your managers. You saying this, Mr. B, but when I go down and I talk to my people, you know you only pass through here once a quarter or once a month because you don't get to go on the field with us.
Yeah, you don't live here. You just pass through here.
That's the point.
Wow. And
the bigger the organization becomes, the greater the level of congruency needs to be across the different levels of leadership.
John Maxwell puts it this way. He says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
What do you do, Franklyn, when as the leader, as the CEO, as the example, right? When someone threatens the risk, someone threatens the level of care we can provide to our team members. When an executive member or any team member, any leader or regular team member is just acting in a way where you know they're intentionally threatening the wherewithal of our culture. How do you address that?
So I always say this. I don't think there's any leader who wants people to leave.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, when I look at employee turnover, resignations, whatever, I always tell people, I mean, that's why that's an important metric.
Yes.
Listen, I appreciate that in a booming economy, employee turnover happens. You know, I think certainly from what I stand now, the Bahamas is in pretty good shape with, going through a robust recovery in tourism from the pandemic. But generally, if you look at the metrics, I tell people, you could manipulate and you could create havoc. But when you see mass exodus in departments, that is usually an indication that is the last resort. And as a leader, one of the hardest things for you to do is to allow people to fail and to make mistakes. And I often say to the team that the mistake often can lead to people leaving. And sometimes good people leave great organizations.
Yes, they do. Yes,
but as a leader, you got to let great people leave the organization for the leaders who are leading them to understand that that's the process.
Yes, that's the price you pay.
But that is hard. Wow. Because ultimately you want to keep that person, but ultimately you got to give that VP, that manager, the opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And then sometimes their best employee leaves and that manager is sitting there saying, boy, I feel bad about it. And here's what the first thing they say. And this is why I take caution. Oh, we could give them a $10,000 raise, and I believe I could get them to stay.
Wow.
That employee tell you straight and plain, listen, you give me all the money in the world.
I ain't gonna say
I ain't staying, man.
Wow.
And oftentimes they're saying, I ain't staying because I'm not prepared to be ruled by manipulation.
Wow.
I'm looking for quality of leadership. I'm looking for, and particularly as you get older, I find, when you're 20, you could handle the money thing. When you get 30, you can handle the money. When you start getting your late 30s and 40s, it's like, hey, I need a decent salary.
Yeah.
But I want peace of mind. I want to be able to go home to my family and be able to work and to know that, listen, when I get home, I ain't stressing about this job and somebody calling me and thing. So this is why I tell you that even in my own journey, I've matured.
Yes.
Because when I was 20, Amad, it was about,
yes,
I had patience. You can't take people to the journey. You ain't so patient. But you soon come to realize that as you get to a certain age and stage in life, that different things matter. Yes, people need absolutely good compensation. But in the leadership journey, people looking for trust currency, man.
Absolutely.
People looking for people who invest in their well-being. People are looking for people who are, even when they going through a tough process, they feel in themselves that, listen, if this brute of a boss taking me through this, I know he taking me through this for a reason.
Yes.
And they often are conscious of, hey, I'm glad you took me through that.
Yes.
And they're coming back and saying to you, hey, thank you so much.
That paid off.
I didn't quite understand what you was doing, but I know if you put me to go through this, there's something that you was trying to get me through. Yes. And that is ultimately where cultures start to set in. Because all of us are now demonstrating a culture of care that does not mean that we're giving people what they want.
Wow.
We're giving them what we think they need.
Talk about that distinction, because sometimes there are leaders who just want to be people pleasers and so they do anything, they allow anything.
Yep.
And there are others who feel like if I show up as too people-y, then I have to be autocratic because otherwise I'll be considered soft.
Yep.
How do you manage that distinction? How do you walk that line?
Well, I think for me, it's fairly easy, and that comes with maturity.
Okay.
Because that is, what are my goals? What are my goals personally? What are my goals for this business?
Yes.
And I always tell people, if you are worrying about the people, you need to be asking yourself, I need to worry about the people in the context of the overarching goals of this organization. And oftentimes that's where people struggle. So you ask them, it's great culture.
Yeah.
But what's the results? And so I recently had somebody tell me, we work hard, boss. And I stop, I say, but we don't measure hard work here.
Wow.
We just measure results here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge, right? Because people are like, but man, you don't appreciate my effort?
Yeah.
No, I absolutely appreciate your effort. But at the end of the day, I gotta measure results.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may not be sleeping. And you may be delivering this and you figure, but you still ain't meet my target. Well, listen, there's a reason why you ain't sleeping and you ain't hitting my target. Let's deal with them root issues.
Yes.
Because that means you ain't getting the report from this person and that person and the next person, but you ain't addressing it.
Yeah. You let that happen.
And that's the leadership part of you. And what I find in our context, Amad, is many of our leaders don't want to have the difficult conversations. We justify it as being people-y. I want to be supportive. I want to be liked. But I tell people respect me. I don't want to be liked. I want to be respected.
Yeah. And they're not respecting you because you say respect you. They're respecting you because you're respecting them enough to get them together to hold them accountable.
Absolutely. And I tell people, if you wait in 24 hours to get something done for me, there could be something we change in that process that the next time you can get that done in 3 hours. I promise you.
Yes.
Because now you can have a conversation with 6 different people and you can ruffle their feathers, so to speak, to get them to recognize how when they do sloppiness, what impact that's having on your role and on the next person's role. Those conversations are the conversations people-y leaders do not like to have.
Yes.
I personally get frustrated with the people-y leaders or people who justify their leadership by saying, I want to be nice, I don't want to call out the issues. It is so much so where I will never write up somebody who has a direct report other than me, but I will bring them in or copy their boss on an email to say, listen, I do not have trust and faith in the system.
Yes.
Until it is fixed, I will not follow the rules.
Yes.
And it's not that I am trying to break down the rules that organizations need.
Yes.
I am trying to send the message ultimately to your boss that you now need to be measuring and disciplining your team.
Yes.
Because I do not see congruence between what you say to me
and what you're actually
and what
doing.
that department is actually doing.
Wow. Wow, that's good. I like that.
And then when I see the employee appraisals and whatever else, they say, oh man, this person way good, man. They way good. What do you mean way good?
Yeah.
If we ain't getting results, right? I don't know.
We're not doing what?
I never see no employee appraisal say effort. I mean, we see effort in school, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get A for effort. At the end of the podcast, they say effort, score, A.
Yeah.
But that's the only time I know. But effort, at the end of the day, we have to produce and measure performance in organizations.
Wow. As we, in a way, are bringing the conversation to a close, Franklyn, when you think of the tenets that have made you successful in leadership, obviously your faith has shaped the way you lead, right? You talked a great deal about this episode about care and demonstrating that care, not just saying that I care, showing people how you value them and how their value is added when they do the best that they can do. Also, that trust currency you talked about as well. What is the message to leaders who are either having a hard time, the person that's just in their first CEO role, who was maybe a CFO, maybe a VP of Ops, maybe an HR director,
Yep.
and now has, instead of the one division or one department, is looking down the barrel at the entire organization. What do you say to them? How do you help them along this journey?
I say to them, first of all, assess yourself. The technical skills that often get you into these leadership roles are often not the skills you have to use
To keep that leadership
your leadership role.
role. Wow.
So I always tell people, if I use a CFO because of my own experience,
yes,
you
yes.
get an accounting degree, you go and get a CPA, you soon find that as a CPA you get into a firm,
Yeah.
you become great in the firm, and people see you, a great auditor. But when you come into work for a business, my old man used to say, accountants are like doctors, right? Don't give me the postmortem when the baby done dead.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, try to help to keep this business going.
Yes.
And when you're an auditor, you tend to focus on what happened, what done happened, and why the baby dead.
Yes.
When you're the CFO of a real business, you're trying to find what I need to do to stop the baby from dying.
Yes.
So what decisions I need to make today to make sure we have a better tomorrow. And oftentimes, that's not about bookkeeping.
Yes.
That's about understanding the strategy. And so you may be able to, I tell people, I know what I know. And so you may know finances, but you may not understand operations. You better go understand operations.
Yes.
You may know finances, but you may not understand strategy. You better go, hey, listen, help me spend some time understanding the strategy behind this business, and go question your board of directors.
Yes.
Because pretending because I am the CFO
Yes.
and I didn't spend 20 years in a firm and I didn't been to school, that don't keep you in the position.
No, sir.
It's really about saying, ultimately, what is it that I know that I could leverage?
Yes.
And what is it I don't know that I could try to learn so that I could leverage the skills that I have in a more effective and efficient way?
Yes.
And so my advice is to anybody who is in a new leadership role, know what you don't know, and don't be shy about going to get the answers for what you don't know.
Yes.
And that, to me, often is around mentorship.
Got it.
Go and find somebody else who you admire. I ask my people all the time, even on my own leadership team, who you look up to? Who do you take advice from?
Yeah.
You sitting in your house thinking you can figure this out because you had a rough day is the problem. Because you continue to regurgitate all of your
The same
insecurities,
things,
all of
yes.
your fears, all of your anxieties is really what you regurgitate to yourself.
Yes.
Until you go speak to somebody, I should I actually, let me just tell you how I dealt with it. You don't have to necessarily take this. And this is why great leadership organizations are incredibly important for all leaders. So go find your leadership organization, go find your group of 5 mentors. And let me say this to you. If all your mentors come in one particular area, if all of them are accountants, that's the problem.
Wow.
If you're the CFO,
Wow.
you need to go have mentors who are CEOs, who are in technology, who in whatever other areas.
Yes. Diversify your pool.
Because at the end of the day, would you think the mentor who is a finance person, they can teach
tell
you what you
you.
already know?
Yes. Yes.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly. But if you get somebody who in technology or who in hospitality or who in some other area, you start to say, wow,
I never saw it that way.
I never saw it that way.
Wow.
And that different perspective is what often allows leaders to tap into what I call that guy,
Yeah.
that young girl who is saying, but you don't quite understand what happened in your organization. Because all along you thought from your perspective, you was getting this right. You was knocking us out the park.
Home runs all day.
And then you look back and you talk to your team and you're like, listen, I don't want to wake you. I'm unhappy.
Yes.
Struggling with this. And you start to say, so that's why.
Now I get it.
Because I'm financially doing exceptionally well. But when it comes to people, so I could produce results for 1 year.
Yeah.
Year 2 and 3 after I done burn them out, people say, man, I ain't no place here for me. Because if you think that's how you can treat me, this is not the organization for me.
Wow. I think this is so good, Franklin. I believe that people often confuse, like I said at the beginning, the ideology of leadership with what leadership actually is. And you've, I think, so beautifully demonstrated what that means. First of all, what do you believe in? What do you value as a person?
Absolutely.
Right? What level of self-assessment is being done? What level of self-development is done? What level of self-awareness do you have? Because if you don't know who you are, how can you help me find out who I am?
That's the point.
Right? The second thing you talked about was that care. Demonstrating care to people, not simply saying, we care. As your CEO, I care. How do you show me that you care? Right? I always get baffled when you use your example about sitting in the contact center.
Yep.
And the response, it's either, I know what happened, why are you here? There's a trick, there's a gimme. Or, boss, I mean, we're going on, why are you down here?
Exactly.
There's always this either disbelief or absolute fear.
Absolutely.
Right? And doing that always connects you so quickly. It's like doing the thing that the team is doing every single day to understand the nuances, the way, what they go through. Because the first thing they said, you know what I'm going through? Let me experience what you go through. So when you realize the chair that she's sitting in for 8 hours is recording.
Absolutely.
That she has to press the thing too hard to air for it to really hear. That she has to squint to look at the computer screen. She has to go 4 bathrooms down to the bathroom that is work. Right? Then you realize, wait a minute, that's why the woman miserable.
And that's why they're answering the phone. That's
why they're answering the phone.
Absolutely.
Because each time she presses the button, the thing is released.
There you go.
And she got you know what I mean? And I think that care creates connection.
Absolutely.
Right? The third thing you talked about was that trust currency. That's a big deal, Franklin.
Absolutely.
If you are not building trust currency, you're building currency of distrust. And you can be bankrupt.
Absolutely.
Mr. CFO, Mrs. Big Numbers person, think about it. If you're not building the currency, you're depleting the currency.
Absolutely.
And if the people can't trust you, they can't give you nothing else. And then the last thing I think we're leaving this conversation with, Franklin, is the fact that it starts with your perception of you.
Absolutely.
Right? If it is that you don't see yourself worthy, valuable, good enough to be subject to correction, to be subject to be held accountable, to ask for forgiveness.
Absolutely.
Where does forgiveness come in leadership? Now you know. Because that same person who you wronged or did something wrong to has the right to hold on to whatever that wrong was. Now, when you've asked for forgiveness, extended yourself for grace, and they decide not to, there's not much else you can do after that.
Absolutely.
But at the first, and in the beginning of that situation, you have to say, you know what?
This was on me.
This was on me.
Yeah.
That was my bad.
Absolutely.
My brother, thank you so much for being here, man. This is a great conversation. I believe you've helped someone navigate their path, Franklin. I believe you've helped somebody understand that leadership starts with you. It's definitely a matter of self-awareness, and that trust currency and that forgiveness is what I'm taking away. I feel like you can't be too big on break through your bridges. So you can't go back and say, you know what, Mary, I'm sorry about that. That was wrong of me. And also working hard to establish that care and get that, build up your trust currency. What's in your bank account?
What's in your bank account?
How much money you got?
That's the point. That's
wow.
the point.
This was so good. Thank you so much, brother, for being here.
Delighted to be here, Ahmad. I hope I've been a blessing to your followers on the podcast. Listen, I don't profess to know everything in my own leadership journey. I'm constantly evolving myself. There's so many things happening in our environment. Again, and I always say we lead within the context of environment. As we think about work from home, as we think about just how the world's changing with AI, etc. There's so much to figure out.
Yes.
And so I tell people, I hope these nuggets are more about principles, because there's no exact best way to lead.
Wow.
This is why there's so many great leaders, and this is also why there's so many poor leaders.
Yes.
Because it is not something that you can tick a box by. And this is what happens, unfortunately, in leadership journeys when you tell people. They often think, well, tick the box. I tick in a box. Leadership is about caring.
Yes.
Leadership is about understanding your own fears. And if you got fears, remember on the other side, someone else has
Someone
fears.
else does as well.
And they often lead from fear, not from strength.
Wow.
And until you understand what you are fearing as a leader, oftentimes you are not going to be able to connect with what that other person is fearing. And that's really what people say when they see me in the contact center. Why are you here, boss?
Yeah. Like, what's
There's
happening?
a problem.
Yeah, I do something. What they say?
So I always have CEO Mix and Mingles. We send out invites. My EA sends out invites. And the first thing people ask is, oh boy, what I do?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to have a conversation.
Yes.
I'm still human. I want to understand what happened in the organization, and then sitting down having those conversations, I soon start to hear little things. Like, okay, I take that away, and then I listen to what my executives are telling me, and I say, okay, is there congruence or is there misalignment?
Yes.
And then you get a sense of really what's happening in the organization. So again, I'm delighted to be a part of this
Thank you
podcast,
so
and
much,
I'm looking
brother.
forward to, the feedback, and hope I've been a blessing to somebody.
Absolutely. You certainly have, Franklin. I think what I want you to leave this episode with is that believe in something, value something. That value is going to spill over into the persons you get the privilege and honor of shaping the lives of. The second thing is lead with care. And don't just say that you lead with care, demonstrate that you lead with care. Pour into yourself so that you can pour into somebody else. You cannot give me what you do not have. Do not be afraid to admit what you do not know, but at the same time, go out and learn that. Once you've learned it, apply it. Ask for forgiveness when you need to. And that last point just now that Franklin shared was, you can only fear what you do not understand. That which is misunderstood has the right to be feared. When you understand a thing, you can now overcome that thing. And so whatever you believe you are fearful of right now, whatever you think is keeping you at bay, conquer that by understanding it and understanding how you show up by way of it. This has been the iLEAD podcast with Amad Rashad Thompson, your host, and Franklyn Butler, our guest. I pray that you have learned, become empowered, you've learned to adapt, and you are ready to disrupt. Thank you for joining us for one more episode. Go out, like, share, subscribe, tell everybody you know about the iLEAD podcast, because every one of us has the ability to lead somebody else and help them to get further along in their journey. God bless you for watching today. Thank you for your support. Have a great day and be blessed.